Hi everybody, it's Susan. Actually, these are my feet. And I wanted to start today with one of my all-time favorite self-care practices, which is a foot soak and a foot massage. So you can see here I have my little tootsies in a bath of warm water, and today I threw in one of my favorite blends of my favorite essential oils, rosemary, lavender, and peppermint. Really good for calming, cooling, kind of soothing aches and pains if you might have some tired feet. I know I was hoofing it around in Chicago a lot. So it's nice to be able to soak and recover and then recover and build some circulation. And the reason I wanted to do this today is because this is one of the things that I think is really helpful when we're starting to practice and understand the bowspring system, to look at the different ways that we can relate to the connective tissue in the body. And it goes from the head to the toe. So it's important to understand that. And when I introduce these videos, as I go further into this sort of practice of putting these videos out, I'm not so eager to rush right into a 20-minute, 30-minute, hour-long practice for everybody, because we have to really understand that we're looking at the body from a completely different premise. We have a totally different foundation that we're standing upon so that we can address and approach the system of the body differently than if we were just to go do a couple of reps with our bicep curls and do a couple of squats for our legs, but really looking at the whole structure to create that feeling and that experience of tensegrity. And the reason I'm starting with the feet today is because we can integrate the underside of the foot, which I'll show you in a minute, and help to tone the whole back of the leg, which goes into that skinny jean effect that I talk about. And it can help to open and relax even some of the overworked muscles, the quadriceps, specifically the outer quadriceps, that a lot of people have overly developed, even in the hip flexors. What you do with the feet can affect all the way up to the hips and the pelvis. So one of my favorite things to do when I'm doing a foot soak, to begin with, before I do the foot massage, is to put in some baking soda, even some apple cider vinegar sometimes, and I love Epsom salts, right? So added with those essential oils, it's really nice to help pull anything that's just heavy or toxic or in the bones or in the tissues of the feet, and you actually start to pull through the biggest pores in the body, which are on the bottom of the foot, anything that needs to be released, and so just kind of lighten the load and free up some energy that might have been stagnated, and it just feels really good. And aromatherapy is always really good, so you can't go wrong with that. So after you've soaked your feet, and you can do this just sitting around watching TV or just in a quiet meditation time, you can read a book while you're doing it. I would do, if you have the time, 10 to 15 minutes. Even just 5 minutes is helpful too, but if you're going to use the products of oils and Epsom salts and everything, you want to give yourself a good time to relax into it. But then it's a really nice follow-up to go into massaging the tissues of the feet. So when we work the bowspring system, we want to think about the microcosm to the macrocosm, right? So think about the foot as a sort of an example, a smaller snapshot of the whole body. So in the bowspring, we look to open the front, which in this case, we're going to talk about the top of the foot as the front, and then integrate the back, which is more the underside of the foot, the arch and the sole of the foot that we're trying to integrate. So when we do the bow, the shape that we're really holding in the template of the curvature in the spine, the double S curve, we're opening the front and we're integrating and strengthening the back body muscles. So as above, so below, the micro of the macro, there's always little fractals of one part that reflect the bigger picture of the whole. So when we work with the feet, we're actually working to the whole system, the whole structure of the body. Probably you've heard any more acupuncture, acupressure, reflexology. There's a whole map of the body that's mapped out on the bottom of the foot. So anything that you do on the tissues of the bottoms of the feet and even with the hands, it's going to affect the whole body as well. So if you've been a good yogi for a long time, or if you've done any yoga classes, or if you've ever been told to work the tissues on the bottoms of the foot, chances are you've been told to lift and spread your toes. Now, I did this for years and years and years, really trying to get the toes to spread as far apart from each other as I can. Same thing with my hands. I was really spreading the fingers really wide whenever I would go to bear weight on my arms, and I got really good at it. And over time, it actually wasn't giving me a lot of support, and what that pushes you into is just another place for hyperextension. Just like we never lock out our knees, we always keep a bend in the knees so we don't hyperextend. We're never trying to hyperextend any of our joints, so any lifting of the toes can actually hyperextend the tendons on the tops of the feet. And as you open the foot, I like to think, or as you lift the toes, I think about it like if you were wearing a pair of socks or a pair of tights. When you lift your toes, the sock, the fabric, would literally come off the bottom of the foot so that there would be a gap underneath the arch. When you lift the toes, the fabric wouldn't be able to stay connected to the arch. The same thing is happening with the fabric of your connective tissue, the fascial network, which works throughout the whole structure. So when you lift and spread your toes over and over and over again, which I did for a really, really long time, it can actually pull the tissue off the bottom of your foot and disconnect that strength. And we look to have the strength on the bottom of the foot integrated so we can be springy, so we can be light on our toes, so that we can be a little bit more ready to move, to be agile, to navigate with more freedom through our lives. So we never talk about lifting the toes at all. In fact, we put the weight more on the paw of the foot with Bowspring, and lifting the toes tends to drop you back to a heel, to weight bear more on your heels. And when you weight bear on your heels more, you're immediately going to be more apt to lock out your legs. And when your knees lock out, your glutes disengage, your tail tucks, and it's just a whole chain reaction of negative actions that you really don't want to perpetuate over the long term. So we keep the toes down, and we talk about the paw, which is basically the toe box, or the forefoot, the front half of the foot staying integrated on the floor whenever we're doing floor exercises or we're standing up. But before we even get there, again, it's really nice to think about what it is as we approach the Bowspring. What is it that's different about how we look at the body than just going into a class and moving through the motions and not really understanding what we're looking to experience within the connective tissue? Because as we open the front and integrate the back, we're then able to start to create that pulling apart effect, which is the tensegrity, which is the suspension and the lightness that we're looking for, that we're all so excited about to share with you, to take pressure off the joints. Because over time, degeneration, age, gravity, heaviness just wears on us and puts a lot of pressure, which can eventually work to compression and bone on bone with the joints. So we look to reverse that. So when we do our little massage, I'm actually going to use another oil. This is one of my favorite massage oils from my favorite oil company. Aroma Touch is the blend, and it's really good for circulation and really good for getting the it's good aroma, but it's also really good for helping to relax the muscles and to help to get that, like I said, the circulation flowing into the bottom of the foot. The hands and the feet are the furthest extension of the body, right? So all of our nervous system, which comes from the brain on down the spine, reaches out, and 72,000 nerve endings come into the hands and into the feet. So when you have healthy hands and feet, chances are you have a really healthy connection from the core all the way to the periphery. So it's good to give some energy and some attention to the edges of the body so that you can continue to give really good flow and circulation and keep that relationship solid and fluid from the core to the distal parts, to the edges. So I'm just massaging in that Aroma Touch blend here at first. Now with the reflexology map on the bottoms of the feet, there's a lot of ways that you can work the sinuses on the tips of the toes. You can work all the organs. You can even work the spine on the inside arch of the foot. But today I just want to show you some places that you can integrate and change the direction of the tissues, especially if you've been a really dedicated yogi and for a long time you've lifted the toes up off the floor when you're standing. We keep our toes down. So when we start to massage, this is again something that you can do before you go into a practice or in between practices or when you're just sitting on the couch. This is really helpful to change the pattern and to start to redirect the tendencies and the habits that would push the tissues in the other direction, like lifting the toes or putting more weight on the heels. So when you start, there's a couple of different ways you can do it, but I like to start by thinking about bowing the top of the foot. So from the knee or from the ankle even, you can start to massage forward from the ankle all the way to the toe. Forward all the way to the toe. And as you do that, you're massaging and you're directing these connective tissues, which are subtle. When you start to play with them at the beginning, you might not feel like a lot is happening, but after you do this and you get up and walk around, you're going to feel significantly different in the two legs. So I highly encourage you to do this. Take time to really press into the bone and then push forward. Press and then massage forward towards the toes. And you can see I'm using one hand to actually curl my toes. It's not that I'm trying to squeeze and overly grip my toes. but I'm just gently letting them curl so the top of my foot starts to bow. And as I do that, I'm just learning to help give a little bit of space in the ankle and in the toes, and then I'm also helping to create that bow shape, which is the opening on the front of the body, or the top of the foot. Now, another way to do that, pretty much the same thing, is coming from underneath. So you can use a fist, you can use a hand, or you can use a loved one. That's always a good option to come in and give you a foot massage, right? So you can relax. But use your fingers or use your knuckles and do the same thing where you're bowing the top of the foot, you're integrating the underside of the foot. You can keep the ankle, the body of the foot a little bit flexed, but you can also keep it a little pointed. Just make sure you're not turning the toes towards you, because you don't want to sickle the foot and then shorten the inseam of your ankle. So massaging inside, or the underside of the foot, you're pushing the muscles up, the tissues up into the bone. And you can do this a lot. You can do this over and over and over again, and all the way through each toe. And you might even sometimes get a little pop, get a little movement, and just know that you're making space in each of the joints of your toes as you're doing that. And you want the space to come from as deep and integrated as possible. When you're doing the top of the foot and the bottom of the foot, you can think about working each toe. So you can kind of come from the instep and massage and give a good grip and pull all the way through the big toe, and then work through the middle toes and work and press and massage those tissues forward, and then pull all the way through. You can do one toe at a time, pull and come from each tendon. You can see the bones, you can see the tendons, how they connect all the way to the furthest toes. Now you can see too, when you lift the toes a lot, you see how those tendons start to pop up off the top of the foot. This is a very patterned reaction for the nervous system. So you might not ever notice, because when you put your feet in shoes all day, out of sight, out of mind. But most of the time, when we have a reaction of fight or flight, when the nervous system starts to get triggered, the toes are going to flare, the elbows are going to pin back, a whole host of things are going to happen to the nervous system. But specifically with the feet, you're going to see that the tendons will actually pop up off the top of the foot. So you want to chill those out, relax them a good bit. So as you massage and then go through each side, you can go from the pinky toe on the underside, push up, and then pull through the toes. And I'm just integrating into the sole of the foot and pushing the tissue up into the bone. Now this can be kind of sensitive depending on what you have going on in your joints or even some of your organs. This can be pretty intense, so be gentle with it, but don't be afraid to go in there and be a little bit intense, be a little bit deep. Sometimes you can use a tennis ball to push, to roll on the top, on the bottom of the foot, or I like a golf ball. And the reason is this: when we start to work the top of the foot open and the underside of the foot integrated, we want to look, we're going to get personal here, I'm going to show you deep into my foot. We want to look right into the middle, right? So we've bowed the top, we've integrated the bottom, and then we can also taco. Just like you woke up this morning thinking, I'm going to taco my foot. But just think about it. Pushing the foot on the inside, in the middle of the foot. I don't really have to do anything with my toes. They just gently curl, right? So I want to integrate this place. This is an acupressure point called K1. It's the bubbling spring. And it's the kidney point for the meridian for the kidneys. So it's helpful to get that integration all the way up for the organs. So as I taco the foot, I'm actually pushing the big toe and the pinky toe towards each other. So I'm not only bowing like a rainbow the top of my foot from ankle to toe, but I'm like a rainbow bowing from pinky to big toe. So I have a really nice open arch on the top and an integrated arch on the bottom. So using the heel of my hand, I'm pulling the top of the tissues across. So I'm rubbing wide, from narrow to wide, from the midline out, and using my fingers to pull the tissues up and into the bone. Now you can do this low and work up, and you can work up and down. But as you do this a couple of times, up and down, you're going to start to feel where there's places, maybe right here for me is a little bit stubborn today. So I want to get deep in there and try to integrate and let the big toe and the pinky toe wrap towards each other like I'm trying to hold a pencil on the inside. I don't want to overly grip with my toes, but it's just nice to be able to feel that deep integration in the inside arch of the foot that helps me get that spring-loaded effect in my foot, which then gives me a lot of that suspension and lightness all the way through my legs and hips. Since the connective tissue is connected all the way at the bottom of the foot, what you're doing here can affect that skinny gene quality that I talk about all the way up into the pelvis, all the way up into the base glutes. And you can actually start to feel that what you do with the foot engages the base glutes. It's incredible, it's powerful, and it's really satisfying to know that what you're doing at the edges can affect all the way to the core. So one more way to open up the foot, once you've bowed open and integrated the bottom, you've bowed across and really deepened the inside arch of the foot, you can come inside where the thumbs are underneath and the fingers wrap on top. You can just go side to side, side to side. And if there's anything crystallized or anything that's stagnating there in the foot, you can really start to wake it up. So this is probably 3 or 4 different ways that you can massage the foot. Meanwhile, I'm soaking my other foot and ready for that other one. And I would use a little bit of, you can use a little bit of coconut oil if you want a little bit, but even the water is nice, and an essential oil is nice to give it, but just to have something to glide across the skin. But this is a really nice place to practice, to start to integrate, because then when you go in to practice the bowspring, or when you go into a class, you're already directing, you're already conditioning the foot and the direction of the tissues to be prepared, so that when you come into a class, you're not automatically flexing and lifting your toes. You're already training your body, training your nervous system to relax, to go into these more maybe not so familiar patterns right away, but as you start to adopt them, you realize how organic they are. Simple, right? These practices are pretty simple, although at the beginning they're not natural, because we're conditioned and we're habituated to be a very different way, where we're very reactionary. So I love this practice because as you start to get more integrated, and really specifically the tissues integrate into the bone, and then you expand out, you realize how organic the movements really are, and how natural they really are becoming. How we move the body becomes a very more fluid, very natural way of movement. But at first it's pretty challenging. So simple but not easy. Simple but profound. So after you've done 5-10 minutes of massage, or after your lover's massaged your foot for you, I would get up and walk around and notice the difference. See if you can feel any difference in your knee, and even all the way up into your hip joint, into the glutes even. And then as you go into a practice, and you're already prepared for never lifting your toes and not bearing weight on the heel, you're going to be much more satisfied with the class, rather than frustrated with things that are a little bit less familiar with for you, right? Especially if you've done a lot of yoga in the past, or any other traditional movement. So just a nice way to give yourself some movement, give yourself some integration, and to set you up for success if you do go into a bowspring class, which I highly, highly encourage you to. Little classes are popping up all around the world, so give yourself a chance to look up. Maybe Global Bowspring is a great place to look up, where you have teachers, or just look around, ask around, Google. It's starting to pop up more and more. But I highly encourage you, go find a local teacher and try a class for yourself. You'll thank me later. I love you guys so much. I'm sure I'll talk to you soon. Have a beautiful day. Give it a try. Let me know if you have any questions. I want to hear your feedback, and we'll talk soon. Namaste.